Okay, I have the pleasure again of being back with Jeff Younger in, where are we right now?
Edison. We're at Edison Coffee
Okay.
in Parker Square in Flower Mound.
Okay, great. So good to see you once again.
Thanks, brother.
So I heard that you announced for Texas Representative, Texas House. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Tell me all about it. What happened and when did you do it?
Well, representatives and senators that were part of the coalition that I had built to try to outlaw, pediatric gender modification
Right.
last session, have really been encouraging me to run after the session.
Oh, they encouraged you to?
Yeah, I was very resistant to it, and eventually Representative Slayton called me late at night around midnight. I think he got me at a weak moment when I wasn't all there, and he said if I run, his brother has a home in Capel where my son lives.
Okay.
And it's at one of the busiest intersections of Capel. They're going to put up an 8-foot sign saying that I'm running for office to protect my son, so my sons will see it every time they go to school.
Well, that would be tremendous.
So they know I'm still working to protect them.
Right. And the teachers as well?
And the teachers as well.
Good.
So I said, well, that's a good reason to run.
Yeah.
And so if you go to jeffyoungerfortexas.com, that's spelled out FOR, jeffyoungerfortexas.com. You can see, what my plans are. I've got big issues there, and I have, unlike other candidates, I've got detailed legislative plans for those. Many of those already have laws that have been authored and have actually been vetted by the Texas Legislative Committee and lawyers at the legislature.
Okay.
So I'm ready to hit the ground running if I'm elected.
Good. So it's going to be more than just renaming post offices and stuff like that.
Indeed. In fact, I have a complete family law reform program.
And that's great. Tell me about that, because I wanted to ask you about that.
Well,
and I have a couple of questions along those lines, but let me listen to you first.
Well, first of all, the big thing is we need to bring accountability to family court judges.
Okay. Absolutely.
And that needs to happen in a number of ways.
Right.
But the way that is the easiest to get done is to simply allow the higher courts to take appeals from interlocutory judgments in family court, which they can't do today. Now, your listeners may not know what an interlocutory judgment is. So right now the Texas courts are really clogged. One of the issues in Texas, we actually need more courts. The courts are very clogged. So a family court action could take 3 years at this point, 3.5 years to get to trial.
Right.
So interlocutory orders tell you how you're going to live for all those 3 years, what your relationship with your child will be, and everything else. And those currently under Texas statutes are not appealable. So there's no oversight over circuit court judges and family courts on what they can do to you in those interlocutory orders. We got to stop that.
Well, to be honest with you, I always wondered why even the courts had any jurisdiction over a family to begin with.
You're right.
That's a big issue in itself. But people don't want to talk about that.
No,
so much.
I had a huge issue. I had a family court judge right here in Denton get really upset with me last night.
I heard a little bit about that. Tell me what happened.
Well, I just asked her, I said, I'd like to ask you some tough questions since you're a candidate for being a family court judge. And she said, I don't have to answer any questions. I'm a judge.
Judge. Okay.
And I said, well, how do we know who to vote for if you don't answer questions and tell us who you are?
Yeah.
And she said, it doesn't matter who I am because I apply the law impartially. My beliefs don't matter. And I asked her, well, then why do judges come to different conclusions about the law? Isn't that a result of their beliefs?
It certainly is.
So it was just a really remarkable conversation. But one part of that conversation, which really threw her for a loop, was she said that the courts are allowed to determine what is in the best interest of the child. And I said, that is absolutely not what the statute says. It is absolutely not what the Supreme Court has said in re CJC and many other cases.
Right.
In which the fit parent presumption applies. So what I want to do is clarify the best interest of the child statute to make sure that judges must apply the fit parent presumption in all cases, even temporary orders, even interlocutory judgments. Always the fit parent presumption applies permanently in all family courts, and that'll stop some of the abuse there.
So I want to ask a question before we go further with that, because the best interest of the child, what I've argued many times is that there's no definition for the best interest of the child.
That's right.
They do use the Hawley factors. The Hawley factors are a non-exhaustive list.
Yes.
And there's no idea how they're being weighted. I'd like to see the exhaustive list. And the thing that always concerns me a lot is that strangers always determine the best interest of the child, going directly against what you were talking about, the fit parent
Yes.
knowing the best interest of
Yes.
the child. So I would love to see these judges define what the best interest of the child is. Is there an objective standard?
There is no objective standard. So, here's how I've illustrated this with just a simple little analogy. Does anyone believe that if you have an Orthodox Jewish family and a Muslim family living next door to each other in Flower Mound, Texas, do you believe that their children go into the same school in the same grade, that they would have the same ideas about what the best interests of their child are?
So
absolutely not.
So you send the Muslim child to the Jewish school,
Yes.
and then vice versa.
Yeah.
And if you have a Christian child, you send them to an atheistic school,
Yes.
which happens anyway.
Yeah. So the fact is, the best interest of the child is a subjective standard.
It's very
That's
subjective.
based on the cultural standards in the community, the history and genealogy of the family, and their customs and practices throughout history,
Right.
and their religious beliefs.
Right.
And what the courts are doing is usurping all of those.
Right.
So basically, what family court judges are saying is, we'll decide how to raise your kids, but you're going to pay for it and do all the work.
Yeah.
So they make all children in divorce court into wards of the state.
Yeah.
And as you know, they also make parents into wards of the state
Right,
because they
right.
have to do all the work.
Right. Yeah. The family court situation is a big mess. But before we go a little bit further, I want to let you continue on with what you were saying. As a legislator, as a representative down in Austin, could you get people that would be like volunteer staff for you? Because I mean, somebody that's talking about comprehensive family court reform, I think that you would have 100, 200, 500 people that would say, listen, let me volunteer and I'll be part of your staff. Is that a possibility
Thanks,
or
Jeff.
not?
Thanks, I appreciate that offer. There's no limit to volunteer staff that I can bring on board.
Okay.
I've already developed a plan for having a dedicated conference room as an office for
Okay.
volunteers.
Okay.
Anyone that's working on my legislation or any conservative legislation in the Capitol that's in my district or as a volunteer, in my office, will be able to use our full office services to further those causes. So there will be a place for you, Jeff.
Okay, I appreciate that. And not just me, there's probably, like I said, there's a couple hundred other people that I'm sure would join
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
So
What we
that's-
want to do is we want to put the hurt on the other side. That is, family court lawyers that are using this as a business rather than a way to make sure the children are taken care of.
Right.
And we want to put the hurt on those people.
Yeah.
And over the last 10 years, the last decade, the Texas Family Court Trial Lawyers Association
Yes.
has introduced tiny little changes at every session, which have had really horrible effects on the family court.
Right.
In the aggregate, they've really created a system of tyranny over parents,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
it has to be ended.
Yeah. You hear people talk about the family court tyranny
Yeah.
all the time, and the star chambers that take place
Yeah,
there
absolutely.
and everything else.
Well, we have recorded evidence now that routinely family court judges simply disobey the rules of civil procedure, all of the due process rules that have been put in place to protect people's constitutional rights. Family court judges, under the best interest of the child mantra, slogan, manifesto,
Right.
have decided that they don't have to follow the law.
Right. Right.
Well, that's another point that I'm going to try to bring up in the legislature.
Okay.
It's going to take me 2 or 3 sessions to get this done. But I want to create a new culture in the legislature where we exert oversight over the judiciary, and we just haven't
Good.
done that in Texas.
Right.
It's been a problem in Texas for a long time. We've only impeached 2 judges in the state of Texas, and yet we know that the State Judicial Conduct Commission has, uncovered felonious acts which
Right.
have actually led to the physical and sexual abuse of children, and yet we have not impeached these judges.
Right. Right.
So the legislature needs to normalize impeaching judges. It needs to be a normal part of our oversight over the judiciary.
Absolutely. So, when you talked about the State Commission on Judicial Conduct,
Yep.
they're terribly underfunded right now.
There.
They are terribly underfunded. They are terribly understaffed, and yet they're having, since 2003 approximately until today, their workload has doubled.
That's right.
They have actually lost staff. The budget is only at 1.2 million. It's peanuts And they're actually being given more responsibilities right now with this most recent.
Oh yeah, their judges are now regulated during campaigns.
Yes,
That's
yes.
right.
So there's a big problem here, and I thought, okay, how do we fix this? Because the first thing the legislature wants to hear is it going to cost the state of Texas money? I want to run something by you and see what your thoughts are about this. So I've thought, like with businesses have to pay for audits.
Yes.
And they have to dedicate a certain portion of their revenue or
Yes.
their income to having audits. What would you think about if judges had to, it was mandatory that they gave 2% of their salaries to help fund the SCJC? It doesn't come out of the state at all. Right now, as it is, the family court judges, many of them are paid more than our governor.
They
more
are.
than the Attorney
All of them
General.
are paid. Almost all of them are
Yeah,
paid.
they start off like 139, 140,
That's
and then
right.
they head up to 168 rather quickly.
Yeah.
And what do? I've watched so many of them. They don't have the same responsibilities, but once they get entrenched in their position, it becomes like a lifelong entitlement to them.
Sure it does.
And I think that we've got to do something to say that they should be funding investigations to make sure that the judiciary is actually working.
Yep.
Any thoughts about that? Because if we did that, and I ran the figures with the judges, if we just took 2% from every judge throughout Texas, we would immediately double the budget of the State Commission on Judicial Conduct. Now, it needs to be probably increased by 5 or 6 or 10 times the amount, but doubling is a good start.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, there's only 2 oversight mechanisms over judges: impeachment in the legislature,
Which never happens.
which almost never happens, and the Judicial Conduct Commission.
Right.
So it's super important,
Right.
And we're talking about the most powerful and least accountable elected official in the state of Texas. These are people who have absolute immunity. Even if you can show that in the conduct of their duties, they knowingly committed felonious acts which
Right.
led to the physical harm of human beings and children, you cannot prosecute them for that. Okay? They have absolute immunity. They can also compel speech, which no other elected official can do that. So,
And also forbid speech.
and forbid speech.
Gag orders that.
So there's tremendous power in these things. They need oversight,
Right.
right? So first of all, I'm totally in favor of it.
Okay.
I've done it a little differently. I kind of like your approach better than mine, actually. My approach was to take it actually out of the county commissioner's budget
Okay.
because the county pays them.
We can combine them.
Yeah, the county pays them.
Yeah.
The county pays their salary. It's really not that much different because
Yeah.
the county pays their salary.
Yeah.
The counties need to pony up for auditing their judges at the
Right.
state level.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, this is not a statutory duty. This is not some new scheme or whatever. This is the constitutional scheme laid down in the Texas Constitution to supervise judges, and it's not working. It's underfunded, and it's breaking down right now, and it's harming children and it's harming families.
I think it's intentionally underfunded.
I agree. No, I have. I'll tell you this: the judiciary has not requested more funding.
Right.
The judiciary doesn't want more funding. It doesn't want more oversight.
Right. Right.
So the legislature has to fix that itself.
And the legislature's been trying to punt that away because the honest truth is that a lot of these legislators get a lot of their money from attorneys,
100%.
and they do not want to see their source of funding for their campaigns go away. So they
You got that
can't
right.
advocate for something that's going to actually clean up the industry when they make dirty money
You got
from
that
the
right.
industry.
You got that right.
So
we need to bring accountability by making the decisions in family court appealable, and we need to fund and empower the Judicial Conduct Commission. Those are 2 big things we could do today.
Yeah.
Other things we could do, Jeff. We talked about these. Temporary orders need to be temporary. I've been under temporary orders for 7 years. I've had my travel restricted. I've
Yeah.
had my passport restricted. I've had my speech restricted. And it's I expect this to go on for another 20 years. Now,
Right.
that's not a temporary order.
no.
And courts are doing this by fiat. Temporary orders are issued by fiat without evidence. There's no requirement. There's a requirement of a hearing, but it's not necessarily an evidentiary hearing.
Right.
Judges can issue temporary orders sua sponte without anybody requesting them.
So what about the idea of with some of these judges, they've made some pretty atrocious decisions, a 3 strikes and you're out sort of rule. Like we talked before in the past, 3 strikes and you're out.
Well-
But we've seen some really, really, really.
We're going to have a constitutional issue on it because these are elected officials. If we had a system where we appointed judges, we could do that.
Yeah.
But here's what I'm proposing.
Okay.
Tell me what you think about this. I want the Judicial Conduct Commission to publicly reveal every case where they find wrongdoing. No matter how minor.
Absolutely.
No matter how minor.
Absolutely.
It should be made public, and the electorate should know. if a judge has committed felonies on the bench, the electorate needs to know not to elect them again.
Right.
Currently, that's all kept secret, and we don't know if these judges are doing a good job or not.
So the other thing that's going on right now that I think would also help to clean up the courts would be if, because with the Zoom hearings, you have video, you have audio recordings. What's happening with these judges, if they let you in to see them, because sometimes they restrict the viewing, which is against another constitutional
It's
issue.
illegal for them to do that.
But they immediately shut it down so that it's not there. Whereas the Supreme Court of Texas, they have their hearings up there for their cases that they hear up forever, as far as I know.
Yes.
The legislature, when we testify in Austin,
Yeah.
those hearings are up there forever. But these family court judges, in particular, and I'll be nice about them, but they immediately cut the hearings because they don't want people to see. What are they hiding? And I think that we ought to have something where, yes, the hearings get put up, they get broadcast, they get put up, they have to be archived, maybe not forever, but at least for a time to allow people to actually monitor their courts, because the courts belong to the people, not to the judges.
Yeah. Look, we need mandatory recording of all courts, not just family courts. All criminal courts, all juvenile courts, all municipal
That's true.
courts,
That's
all
true.
county courts, all justice of the peace courts, every appeals court, including our two Supreme Courts, the Texas Supreme Court and the Court of Criminal Appeals, all
Right.
need to be recorded.
Right.
Whether those recordings are released to the public or whatever is a matter of public policy, but every elected official and the official performance of their duties should be subject to public scrutiny
Right.
at some level.
Right.
So once we get that they should be recorded, the next question just becomes, well, then what do we get to see? Okay, if there are some legitimate privacy concerns, we should require courts to have evidentiary hearings to violate, because they're going to violate the constitutional rights of the people to see the hearings.
As we know, because we've seen this again and again already.
I would like the court to be required to appoint a guardian ad litem for the interests of the people to see the trial and to have an evidentiary hearing on that basis,
That'd be
which
great.
is appealable
Yeah.
and would be appealable by anyone who wants to see the trial.
So with regard to the
I want a similar approach
Yeah.
for big tech privacy as well. We can talk about that later.
yeah. So with regard to transcripts, right now this is a racket. When people have to get a transcript and have to pay $6-7 a page.
Yeah.
I mean, you can. The most expensive books in my library are court transcripts.
Oh yeah.
And with the technology that we have currently, we should be able to produce transcripts at virtually no charge, very, very minimal charges, and it would help to create the idea that you could have actually justice, due process for everybody. I believe up in Tennessee, when you go to court, they actually give you a DVD of the entire hearing, both to both the defendant and also to the plaintiff. Is that something that would be easy to do? I mean, so we charge them $50.
So my
versus
view on the transcripts,
5,000.
the reason I'm looking down here, I don't know if you see this, but I just ordered court transcripts for my hearings.
Okay.
And I just about an hour ago got a reply back from the court reporter in the 301st District Court. So I had a 30-minute hearing, and it's going to cost me $330 to get that transcript. I had another 10-minute hearing, that's going to cost me $210. I had a 1-hour hearing, and that's going to cost me $800.
Wow, it's incredible. It's
So here's my view on this. It's very simple. The court reporters are already paid by the state. They're paid by the county. Why are we paying them again to produce transcripts? They're already paid to produce transcripts. So I don't understand why we're double paying. And I think if you look at what's been determined to be a reasonable amount to pay for accessing court records is up to $1 a page for a printed page. For PDF pages, it's like 10 cents a page. Okay, I think that's exactly what we should do. It should be 50 cents a page, something like that, for an electronic record, and that's it.
okay.
I think they can charge a reasonable fee, but honestly, I think counties should work towards a zero fee for transcripts. It's part of the appeals process, and when you're asking people to pay $5,000 just to get transcripts to appeal, many people can't afford that, and so they don't appeal.
Right.
And so judges aren't held accountable again because there's no appeal.
What about the attorneys as well? Because there's a lot of corruption there, and the attorneys. I've been shocked when I've watched some of these hearings how many times they've made errors and the opposing attorney will say something, and you're kind of like, this should be attorney 101 stuff, and yet the person who has hired this attorney has paid hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars perhaps, and they're not being well represented. But the other thing is that even the attorneys, they're violating some of their own ethical practices. For example, I saw this not too long ago. I was reading through their stuff, and they said that attorneys are supposed to encourage reconciliation, not divorce.
Yes.
None
of them do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely none of them do
So
that.
they should all have ethical complaints filed against them.
Here's what I've thought through, and I don't know that I could get this done in the first session, but we have a Judicial Conduct Commission that's separate from the judiciary, right?
Right.
It's got some judges on it, it's got some members of the Bar Association, and it has regular citizens on it, right? The bar, it's very clear the bar can't police itself.
Absolutely, it cannot.
So what we need is an attorney conduct commission, similar to the Judicial Conduct Commission, where citizens can bring complaints and they can be independently investigated from the bar, and not only ask whether what they're doing is legal, but whether it meets the strict ethical canons of the bar.
Right.
And the ethical canons that are required in each of the local jurisdictions.
Right.
And I think what we would find is a lot of lawyers would have trouble.
Yeah,
They'd be in trouble.
trouble would be
Put it like
a very
that.
kind word. So
I've never been in a trial. I've been in continuous litigation for 8 years. I've been in civil court twice a month for 8 years. And I have never once had a court hearing at which an attorney did not lie and perjure themselves at least once.
yeah, or
Never once, not even once.
yeah. So that would be something good to be looking forward to as well. Let me ask one other question here, and then I'll let you continue on if you want to now.
Sure.
But we've got kind of taken a little bit of
Yeah,
a side.
yeah, we need to
here.
get out of here, but
Yeah.
let's one last question.
So, okay, regarding legislators that are there, according to our Texas Constitution, Article 3, Section 22, it talks about legislators should not be acting in a public manner that will benefit themselves privately.
Correct.
So, and they should make their private conflict of interest known and recuse themselves from voting. And that's according to our Texas Constitution.
Yes.
And yet, when we talk about comprehensive family law reform, we have to go through the JJFI, the Juvenile Justice and Family Issues Committee. This last session, we had 2 divorce attorneys on there,
Yes.
and we had another person who actually owns a law firm that deals with divorce.
Yep.
3 people that actually benefit in their private lives by increasing litigation and increasing conflict through divorce.
Yes.
So why are any of these people voting, and what would we do with legislators who actually refuse to adhere to the conflict of interest standard that they should have?
I think this is very simple. In order to serve on a legislative committee, you ought to have the same objectivity that you have to serve on a jury.
Okay.
It's real simple. If it's your job to prosecute divorces, and you have divorces pending in Dallas County, you probably shouldn't sit on a divorce trial in Dallas County. I mean, this isn't rocket science, folks.
Yeah.
If you have a pecuniary interest in
Yeah.
the outcome of anything before the committee, you shouldn't be allowed on the committee.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of other questions we could ask you about, but again, the one thing that I love that you said is that you can have volunteers, as large of a volunteer staff.
There's no limit to the volunteer staff that I can bring to bear in the Capitol, and I would honestly like to have an army of thousands of volunteers
Okay.
to get these changes through the legislature and to produce a lobbying like has never been seen before in the state capitol.
That would be great. Now, how do people who want to become part of this team contact you once again? How do they follow you? How do they look more at who you are as a person, your website?
Yep, go to my website, jeffyoungerfortexas.com. It's spelled out F-O-R, jeffyoungerfortexas.com. Sign up for my email list. Look at my biography, look at the issues, and we'll keep you informed about how you can get involved and make this happen at the next legislative session.
Well, Jeff, once again, it's so great to see you again.
Thanks a lot. Good to see you.
Thanks so much.
So long.
Bye now.